What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video. If you guys haven't already, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or your drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. I know it's been a while since I've done a video. And obviously the past few weeks it's just been Boys in the Big Apple and Dead Red when it was on. So I apologize. Finals and a lot of other things coming out of my freshman year of college. But with that being said, I do want to cook up some Giants content. I want to cook up some content in general. Tomorrow night we will be streaming, most likely, the Heat Celtics game, so join us for that. Thursday is the Dead Red podcast. Friday we will be streaming the Yankees versus Rays game, and tonight I will be on NYY News TV, the network that I am a part of, for the Yankees-Orioles game with Pete Simonetti. Maybe Joe from Twitter, Joe Giamp, I think his name is. I don't want to get too wrong because if I said Joe, you guys wouldn't know who I'm talking about. Or Gary Sheffield Jr. might join us as well. It's going to be fun. But let's get going. Let's talk about this. So this video is probably going to be titled or along the lines of the New York Giants secondary. It's not just the cornerbacks, it's the safeties as well. And ever since James Bradberry was released, and some can even go back further into the free agent weeks and attribute all of this discussion to the release of Logan Ryan. But a lot of the concern of the Giants secondary, or concern for the secondary, if you want to put it like that, has come from the James Bradberry release. Now, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of things, answer a lot of questions to the best of my ability. And we're just going to go ahead first and preview the cornerback room. With that being said, let's go to Adoree Jackson first, who is the presumed number one corner. Last year, he did have an interception. It was tipped, by the way. I forget who tipped it, but actually, no. Mike Evans tipped it up in the air, and he caught his interception. Then Andrew Thomas caught the touchdown. We all know what happened there. But he played in 13 games last year for the New York Giants, had one interception, allowed a completion percentage of 52.1 as the second cornerback, and that wasn't bad, honestly. I mean, at times, he acted like the corner one, but at the same time, he was facing, I would say, lower-level receivers compared to James Bradberry on the other side, so that's kind of what you have to look into if you're a New York Giants fan. He gave up 353 yards, a 69 passer rating, and 2 touchdowns in coverage to go along with 62 tackles. And it's going to be a really interesting year for Adoree Jackson. This is probably, and I'm speaking truthfully here, this is probably going to be his last year as a New York Giant, as next year it looks like the Giants are in a situation where they can release him to get more cap space. And it's going to be interesting too, because we'll talk about it later. Are there any real cornerback ones in free agency next year? We'll see about that. But now we go into the less experienced of the cornerbacks, and it's going to get less experience, less experience, less experience. The experience is going to go down as we talk about these cornerbacks. Aaron Robinson. I do want to get to the safeties as well, but let's talk about cornerbacks. Now, Aaron Robinson had 9 games played for the New York Giants last year. 2 games started. He allowed a completion percentage of 63.3, gave up a touchdown against the Chicago Bears, 94.3 passer rating. So around similar stats to Darnay Holmes, but he came onto the scene like Xavier McKinney did, and I know that's a big overreaction to some, but a guy who didn't play the first 7-8 games, then he's just in there when Adoree's hurt, and when James Bradberry, I think he played the whole season last year, but I'm saying, like, when Bradberry didn't show up on his side of the field, Aaron Robinson was locking down the second, third receivers, also in the slot as well. So I thought he had a very productive rookie year for a third-round pick, and I'm really excited to see what he does in Don Martindale's scheme of press man coverage. They already have him playing at the 2 spot. Obviously, it's OTAs, so we can't really predict anything big or small or whatever, but that's probably going to be his home in his second year. The next guy is Darnay Holmes. Darnay Holmes played a total of 11 games last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt in the game I was at when Jordan Mailata crushed his ribs or his lungs. I forget which, but I think he crushed his ribs when Darnay Holmes had an interception off Jalen Hurts. And, of course, the big crybaby strikes again, as Giants fans like to say. But anyway, he had 1 interception. He gave up a completion percentage of 66.7 from the slot, 213 yards, 71.9 passer rating. Also to go with 2 quarterback pressures and 29 combined tackles. Darnay Holmes improved a little bit last year statistically, though I would say it wasn't too noticeable. Not just, oh, he's a cornerback, and sometimes you really don't look at that position unless they're performing badly. But at the same time, the Giants secondary was on and off last year. James Bradbury, giving up big plays. Logan Ryan necessarily wasn't himself from the prior years. Julian Love was Julian Love. So there was a lot of on and off moments last year, and a lot of people actually are off the Darnay Holmes train. A lot of people are still on the Darnay Holmes train. And listen, look, he is probably one of the more experienced cornerbacks on this team, regardless of he plays slot or outside. And he does have tackling issues. I feel like he has a weaker body there. Maybe in week one, they don't play him a lot. And I'm just suggesting this because Derrick Henry is a tough runner. He'll be 100%. He'll be pushing guys out of the way. And I feel like Darnay Holmes is not really strong in the running game, whereas Cordell Flott, obviously, that's a different story. But Darnay Holmes has that experience. He's coming into his third year in the league, while the other guys on the roster really haven't played as much as he has the last 2 years. So that's that. Michael Jacquet, the third or the second, I don't know which one. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name right. I'm still waiting on some I can't say references, but some notes from different fan bases on our new corners. Like the next one after Jacquet is Maurice Kennedy. I know the Jets had him, so I asked my brother about him a little bit. And then there's Khalil Dorsey, and there's a couple other guys as well. But Michael Jacquet, not a ton of experience. When he came into the league 2020, he started a total of 2 games, appeared in 7, gave a completion percentage of 71.4, 380 yards allowed in coverage with a passer rating of 137.5, so that's not really good. Last year, he only played 1 game with Jacksonville, and Jacksonville was a mess last year. So, I mean, he could succeed in the system. I don't know too much about Jacquet, but with that being said, I wouldn't bet on him making the roster. And it's possible he gets reps with the second team and the third team in training camp, but, it just remains to be seen. Not a lot of predictions can be made. Maurice Kennedy is a guy I know more about than Jacquet. I know statistically where he's been. I know where he's been in terms of teams. And obviously I got some references and just some notes off my brother because he did play for the Jets. He opted out in 2020. In 2021, he gave up 4 receptions on 4 targets. So it's 100% completion, 60 yards, and 1 touchdown, 158.3 passer rating. And that was actually with the Dallas Cowboys. As I mentioned, opted out in 2020. In 2019, spent time with 2 separate teams. He spent time with the Jets towards the latter end of the season, beginning the season more with Baltimore. And if you want to ask for, which is better stats, his passer rating was better with the Baltimore Ravens. His completion percentage was actually a tad bit better with the New York Jets. He had an interception with the Baltimore Ravens, and the Baltimore Ravens obviously were a very good defense in 2019. So that was probably his best year. That's the year where you can make most of what he was. I'm not going to say whether he's going to return to 2019 form or not. I don't think that's a reasonable statement to make. With that being said, though, I could see him getting real cornerback reps this season. If Flott's not ready, if Adoree Jackson's hurt, if Darnay Holmes is for some reason not in there, I think Kennedy, who has familiarity with Don Martindale and some of the coaches on the staff, I think he gets some playing time. The next guy I don't know too much about. Last year, I don't think he played. He had an injury, was actually put on IR by the Ravens in the preseason. His rookie year was in 2020. His name is Khalil Dorsey. 6 games, gave up a 39-yard reception in 2020, and that was pretty much it, and had 2 tackles. In 2020, played only 1% of the defensive snaps, so you can't really gain much there. And once again, this goes to the inexperience of the cornerbacks. And even a guy like Maurice Kennedy, who's been in the league for a little while now, going back to 2018 when he first appeared in this league, he's been injured a little while. Going back to 2019, which, he played the most, 13 games. Last year he played 8 games, but some of those reps were not all on defense. Special teams as well, that's what he excels at. And the same thing, 7 games total for 2018, with the Baltimore Ravens. So, once again, don't get fooled by, he's played with the Jets, he's played with the Cowboys, he's played with the Ravens. Not a lot of experience there. But we go to an undrafted free agent by the name of Darren Evans, and a lot of people don't have too many expectations for him. I don't, because you look at the names out of LSU, Derek Stingley and Cordell Flott, and then you look at Darren Evans, who started the last 5 games down the stretch. He's not very good in man-to-man coverage. He's got good size, though. So, once again, not a ton of experience, and that's what Joe Shane, ideally enough, attacked in undrafted free agency. A lot of guys who, on one hand, have a lot of experience. We'll get to that with some of these guys. And then some guys who really don't have a lot of experience, like Darren Evans. Next guy is an interesting character for the New York Giants, and he was drafted last year, I believe, in the 6th round out of Oklahoma State by the name of Rodarius Williams. Last year, he played 5 games. He gave up a total of 4 receptions on 4 targets. So obviously the passer rating is through the roof. Gave up a touchdown. I believe that was actually against the Cowboys. If not, it was against another team. With that being said, though, he did have a bullshit penalty called on him in Week 3 against the Atlanta Falcons, and a lot of I would say expectations were high for him, because coming out of training camp, we heard, oh, this guy's great. He's lining up at corner 2 because Adorie's injured, and he could take over easily, right? He could play the slot. And what Patrick Graham, and I don't want to reference this too much because it has nothing to do with what this team, is now philosophically, but Patrick Graham did want to get into more man coverage. He wanted to run more blitzes like he did in Miami. The problem is he didn't have the frontage personnel to do it, and that's why the Giants secondary did get burnt in Week 1 against the Denver Broncos. But Rodarius Williams was drafted for man coverage, and he fits Martindale's scheme. But the thing is, though, is he's coming off of a torn ACL. I forget which one. Is it Achilles, ACL? I think it's an ACL. Soft tissue injury, if that's what it is, and I'm not too I would say health IQ smart in terms of body parts. But with that being said, we saw a lot of ACL injuries. We saw a lot of season-ending injuries last year. Not going to get too much into that. But if he does well in training camp, he could make the roster. Maybe he makes the practice squad. I feel like he could still stick onto the roster. I feel like he should stick onto the roster because I feel like there is something there. The problem is that he only played 5 games last year, didn't play a ton of defensive snaps, and are the New York Giants in their new regime, are they going to actually develop that rather than their own guys? The next thing I want to talk about is flying under the radar, and he's actually getting some safety reps in OTAs. I'm not going to take too much stock into that, but this guy played well down the stretch last year for his role. Dory Jackson was injured. Aaron Robinson was on the COVID IL. I'm talking baseball here. COVID IR. Jaron Williams. So last year, he gave up 8 completions on 21 targets, which is really good. 53 yards, 38.1 completion percentage allowed, which is, once again, good. 46.3 passer rating. I think he only gave up 1 touchdown. I believe that was against the Los Angeles Chargers. Total of 18 tackles and 6 games. And a lot of expectations, actually not a lot of expectations, because the year before last, he was just a special teamer out of Auburn, getting the snaps when he can, whatever. He started earning snaps, I believe, in that Eagle game. And then when Adoree got hurt and a lot of the other secondary players went down, he started getting more snaps. Miami Dolphins game, the Chargers game, the Eagles game, right? So I believe he, in the limited time he did play, I feel like he played well. And you can make your distinction. Oh, is it man coverage? Is it zone coverage? Whatever. I feel like he could be a guy on this team that is a role player. I'm not saying cornerback 2 or slot corner, but he could be a role player, right? We talk about experience 1,000 times. We've talked about it just 1,000 times already. This guy is coming into his 3rd year, and he played some snaps last year, right? He probably played about, let's just say 20%, 30% maybe, if that. But looking at this youth of the secondary, he's one of the more experienced guys. Next is Zion Gilbert, who played at FAU, and he actually played 5 years. He did get that extra year because of the COVID year. He's got good instincts. Will struggle against physical wide receivers. He's got good safety reps. I mean, it's not like he's going to be a safety in the NFL if he does play at the NFL level. He's got good reps in man-to-man and off-ball coverage. He had 2 interceptions last year, a total of 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I misread that. 50 tackles overall, and 12 games for FAU. And it looks like he's a consistent starter, but the problem, well, I should say the whole thing remains is the competition. Will he struggle against physical wide receivers? It's going to be an interesting one. And I haven't done too much research on Zion Gilbert, but we'll see if he makes the roster. Maybe he's a guy they just stashed on the practice squad for depth reasons and development reasons. Now we go into the safety group, and then we'll start breaking down the questions from there. Xavier McKinney, we all know that, possibly he should have been a Pro Bowler last year. A lot of Giants fans actually disagree with that. But last year, he played all 17 games. He gave up a total of 38 completions on 56 targets in coverage. That's about 67.9, which is better than his rookie year, 443 yards. 72.2 passer rating, so that's up from his rookie year. 1 pressure on the quarterback, 93 tackles. And, he did jump last year. He did make an improvement last year. 5 interceptions. Obviously, the 2 off the Raiders, the 2 off the Rams. I know a lot of people really don't take stock into that. Those were good plays, but they just didn't count for anything because the Giants were down bad in that Week 6 game against the Rams. And there was another game that he had an interception in. I can't think of it right now, but actually, that was against the Eagles, I believe, right? Tay Crowder had a pick. Darnay Holmes had a pick, and I think McKinney also had a pick as well. So that was one of those games. McKinney's going to be one of the starters, and he is going to succeed, in my opinion, in this system. I feel like it is so much his system. When I mocked him in 2020, part of the mock draft season, when I mocked him, I had him actually going to the Ravens. But he went to the Giants, he fell, and now he's in a good situation. Hopefully the Giants can continue his development on a positive note. With that being said, we move to another guy who is also, once again, one of the more experienced players in the secondary, Julian Love. Last year, I thought he did well for his role, and I'm not holding him to the highest of standards. He's a 4th-round pick. You're not expecting too much about a 4th-rounder. I know a lot of people were excited. Then in 2020, he really had a bit of a downfall. In 2021, just like, okay, he's just a role player, the second starting safety. In coverage last year, he gave up a completion percentage of 71.1. He had an interception. I forget when he had the interception, but he did have an interception. Gave up 2 touchdowns, a 97.5 passer rating in coverage. Total of 2 pressures and 66 tackles. So he's going to be that other safety. I think that's pretty obvious. If they don't start him at other safety, maybe it's because of injury. God forbid, please don't do that, because the Giants have enough adversity in their secondary. But he's going to be one of the starting safeties. That's just going to be there. He's no automatic lock for the roster. And who knows if he's re-signed? That's going to be probably maybe another video in the future if he does good this year. Is he going to get re-signed? Because this is the final year of his contract. The next guy is Henry Black, a guy I've asked Packers fans, what about this guy? What is he about? He just seems like, a rotational safety, a special teams guy. He had an interception last year off Kyler Murray that was actually tipped. But he did play all 17 games last year, so probably the special teams. Gave up a completion percentage of 72.4 in coverage, 322 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 117.3 passer rating to go along with 38 tackles. So probably a role player. Maybe they tack him on because of the experience. We'll see what they do with the practice squad stuff, because maybe they stash him on the practice squad. Who knows? The next guy, a lot of people are identifying as this guy. Yeah, he will make the roster in their predictions. We'll see what happens. But by the name of Yusuf Corker, Kentucky safety. Let's go over his stats. Have one sack last year, 3.5 tackles for loss. The last 3 years, he's had 70-plus tackles. He had 82 this past season. He's got good instincts, can play deep, but mostly good in the box. That's probably what he's going to be if he develops into a starting safety, or at least a rotational safety for the New York Giants. Doesn't have great athleticism. He's a heavy hitter. Mentioned the instincts. Struggles in man-to-man coverage. And the thing with Yusuf Corker that I mentioned about Dane Belton and a lot of other guys, and even Brendan Smith, for example, in the pre-draft process, is they're heavy hitters, but the problem is that they can miss a lot of tackles because sometimes they'll go for the bigger hit instead of the simple tackle that's needed, and then big play, 60 yards rushing or whatever the play may be, yards after the catch, because they decided, let me make the highlight reel play or attempt to instead of just making the simple tackle. And obviously, you probably see that a lot at the college level more than you will at the NFL, because the NFL obviously once again is more disciplined and you're working your way into the NFL, especially if you're an undrafted free agent. Sometimes that will actually lower your draft stock than put it up higher. But his tackling will need to get better. We have two more guys on the list. Trenton Thompson. And according to this, he's actually played 6 years in college, which is really weird. Maybe he got left back a year. Obviously, add that on to the COVID year that he got. So he's got 2 years as a senior, 1 year as a freshman, 2 years as a sophomore, and 1 year as a junior. Obviously went to San Diego State. I believe Daniel Bellinger went to the same college. So competition concerns are probably there for some people. He had 3 interceptions this past year. Total of 3.5 tackles for a loss. 43 tackles. Can play the nickel, deep, in box. Older player with instincts, once again. Total of 6 years in college. So he's one of the more experienced guys, but he's older, so that may come with a price. He's a heavy hitter. His athleticism isn't great. You look at the combine numbers, you look at the pro day numbers, they're not great. Recognizes routes, plays well. Multiple blocked punts and forced fumbles on special teams. That's what a lot of people like about him. There's questions about athleticism and all the stuff I just mentioned, but if he can get get on the Giants roster on special teams and then work his way from there in a secondary that needs playmakers, he could be on the roster as a playmaker. And obviously in the NFL, you would love to strive and reach for the stars. But I feel like for Trenton Thompson, coming from a small school, all those years in college, at least make it into the NFL on an active roster as a special teams guy. But I know a lot of people are excited for this dude. And this one, a lot of Giant fans are shaking their head, scratching their head, or they're just not wowed by this player. Dane Belton, Iowa safety, 3 years in college, had a total of 5 picks this year, 3 tackles for loss, 46 tackles, 1 forced fumble in his collegiate career, and 7 pass deflections this past year. He can play slot, he can play safety, he can play in the box. He played a lot of man coverage, a lot of good man coverage, but he also played a lot of zone. That's probably where most of his experience comes from. He does get burnt badly, though, sometimes, by the over-the-top route. You'll see Wendell Robinson, when he beat him over the top, that doesn't look very good. Obviously, I mentioned the ball skills. And I just feel like for this certain player, and I understand, Julian Love, you could attribute or, talk about in his own way with his own strengths and weaknesses. But for me, Belton outside the New York Giants doesn't have a high ceiling. Let's just say he doesn't work out for the New York Giants. I don't see him getting the same type of role with the Giants and the same type of playing time with the Giants as he, to any other team. Maybe the Ravens. What I'm trying to say is it's going to be a scheme-based thing. A lot of people say about the tight end position, the tight end is a product of the scheme and the coaching. He may flash well, or at least flash decently under Don Martindale, but if he goes to another team, for example, like maybe the Jets, or, I don't know, the Texans, he may not flash as good because he's not utilized that way. And I don't know. I just don't see a lot of ceiling for Dane Belton. I hope I'm seriously wrong. But I'm just left confused by the pick. With that being said, we have some questions to answer about this secondary. I'm going to take a sip real quick. So let's talk about the slot. That is one of the bigger questions facing the New York Giants, and sometimes you could, answer it easily as a fan. Sometimes you may not be able to answer it as easily. But I ran a poll, and it's still going, so if you're on Twitter, please vote. I want to see you guys' opinions. I put, who would you rather take as the slot cornerback? Please retweet and share. I would like to see what Giants Nation thinks. I put Darnay Holmes, Cordell Flott, and then others. Because sometimes, maybe Jaron Williams. Maybe you like Zion Gilbert as a slot corner. There's a ton of slot corners that the New York Giants have. Some of them inexperienced, of course. But right now, 54.5% say Darnay, and 45.5% say Cordell Flott. And there's a lot of different things we could talk about with these two corners. Cordell Flott, he needs some hamburgers. He needs some hot dogs. He needs some chicken buckets. What I'm trying to say is he needs to build up strength. He's 175 pounds right now. If you get that to 195, maybe even 200, he'll be good at the next level. Something that's more beneficial for him rather than Darnay Holmes is he's good, because even though his weight and his size isn't necessarily the greatest and most fitting for the NFL, he's a guy that's going to make tackles in the running game. I had a video, or actually a live stream a few weeks ago, where I was showing highlights of the different rookies we drafted. He makes a couple of tackles for a loss, and he can play in the box. Darnay Holmes, I can't say the same about Darnay. He may be better in man coverage. He may be better with ball skills. But with that being said, Cordell can play the outside. Cordell can play the slot. I don't know that Darnay can do that. So, I really haven't made a decision personally on who I would like for the slot, but obviously there's some for Darnay, there's some for Cordell Flott. And right now in OTAs, and I'm just going to say this, I'm not trying to, spin the wheel or anything like that. I'm not trying to get rumors flying, but Darnay Holmes has been playing the slot in OTAs. It is what it is, but we'll see. I think it's more of a long-term thing for the New York Giants, because I believe after next year, you can start letting guys, the contract's over for guys that were drafted in 2020. So maybe guys like Carter Coughlin, if he stays, Darnay Holmes is another guy. So maybe they value Darnay Holmes as the first 10-game slot corner, and then Cordell Flott goes in there because it's their guy. So there's that. Injury-prone Adoree Jackson. I'm going to combine two questions into one. And I know I'm talking about more of the cornerbacks. We'll get to the safeties in a little bit. I honestly have more to talk about with the cornerbacks. But combining two questions, injury-prone Adoree and experience. We talked about experience a lot. And it's going to factor in because Adoree Jackson is not going to play 17 games. Anyone who does think that, I don't know what you're thinking, honestly. You need to get your head checked. In all the years in the NFL, other than his second year in the league, he has not played 17 games. He hasn't played a full season. Missed a lot of games last year. That caused Aaron Robinson to be the second cornerback. Obviously, that was against the Dolphins. So he's not going to play the full 17. And the problem with that is, depending on how you see it, and I will, have a point, because I know there's a lot of people, shout-outs to Miz, by the way, who really want to see these young cats play and don't give a shit about, we don't have veteran cornerbacks. I know there's a point I'll make at the end about that. But guys are going to have to step up. When Adoree goes down, Aaron Robinson may be slotted as the first cornerback. Cordell might be that second cornerback. That third cornerback, that slot cornerback, is probably going to be Darnay. Or maybe sometimes Jaron Williams will get some reps. I don't know specifically how he is in man coverage. But let's just say they cut Jaron Williams. They don't think he's of value. Let's just say Rodarius Williams is gone. Some guys will have to step into the fire. Maurice Kennedy, I feel like he's going to get some reps at cornerback this year, more than, honestly, a lot of people think, because he has that Martindale connection. Maybe Khalil Dorsey makes the roster. Maybe they like him in the preseason. He doesn't have a lot of experience. So the growing pains are not necessarily a good thing to sit through if you're a New York Giants fan. And we've seen this many times before, not just in our own world, but across the NFL. How many defensive backs and how many rookies did the Miami Dolphins draft on defense in 2019? Their defense was historically terrible. What was it? Over 100 points given up within the first two games. But guess what? There's something at the end we're going to talk about. Anyway, the full throttle plan. The New York Giants, I believe, are in a situation next year to go out and release Adoree Jackson to add to their cap. But they could also keep him. The Giants are in good stability next year in terms of cap, and we have yet to see what Joe Schoen is going to do, what the front office is going to do in free agency. Or are they just going to work to re-sign guys early? Is it going to be Andrew Thomas that gets re-signed? Xavier McKinney, is he going to eat the cap because he's getting re-signed? That's really something the Giants haven't done in the last couple of years, is re-sign their own players. Why am I talking about Adoree Jackson being released? It's not just about Cordell, but it's about having a number one corner. I know there was a certain player, I think his name is Moss or something like that, Josh, I can't even think of his name, but there's a cornerback that's coming out of Alabama in 2023 that may be a number one. I don't know where he's going to be in the draft, but he may be a number one corner. And maybe the Giants look to draft him, but the problem is, what if they need a quarterback? You know, it's going to be an interesting plan. And the thing is, with a win now type of roster, or at least expected to make a jump in 2023 with all the cap and stuff like that, let's just say you release Adoree Jackson, and you see some growth out of Flott. You see some growth out of Robinson. You look at that free agent class, other than Marcus Peters, there's not really a cornerback one. So maybe you go out and draft the guy. There's a lot of, I would say, conundrums within that one situation because of the situation the New York Giants are in with the secondary. And this could apply to safety too. If Xavier McKinney's re-signed and they say, look, Julian Love, you're great, but you're not our type of guy, they got to go out into free agency and spend that money. I mean, I haven't looked at the safety class, but what if they try to get that in the first, second round? So we'll see what happens. In terms of safety, Xavier McKinney and Julian Love are probably the starters, but look for guys like Yusuf Corker. I know, obviously, I just mentioned Jaron Williams got some reps there, Trenton Thompson, Dane Belton. So there's going to be a lot of role playing, and there are times that we will see these guys get burnt, cornerbacks and safeties alike. And here's what I will say. A lot of people think, and I haven't necessarily made up my mind yet, not because, I want to side with this fan base, their points and views and all that stuff, or I want to side with this side. No, I'm not that type of guy. I don't reflect myself, and I don't put my views into my own head because this side thinks that way, and I don't want to get offended, or I don't want to get them offended because they're my audience, blah, 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 bullshit. I'm not PC, any of that. Anyway, don't want to stray from the point. There's a certain side of the fan base that thinks, let the kids play, do not sign anybody else, leave that, roll that into next year. There's another side of the fan base, like we talked about Boys in Big Apple with Justin Pennick and Donald Stewart. Should they sign a veteran corner? And that class right now, the current class that's free agents, doesn't really look that good. I think Anthony Averett signed somewhere else. He was a guy that we could have looked at, but I think he signed somewhere else. I'll take a look where he signed real quickly. Yeah, he's with the Raiders, so they have a shit ton of corners over there, and that could be a good defense with Patrick Graham. So I'll end the video on this. If you're on the side of sign a cornerback, I don't blame you, because I feel like stability needs to be there. Adoree's not going to play all 17, and there's pros and cons to both sides. It's tough to say. If you're a guy or whoever that wants to see these rookies develop, I could see your point. But there's two things you have to prepare yourself for. A, tons of burning in the secondary, because these rookie cornerbacks and these cornerbacks that we have overall outside of Adoree and Darnay and Jaron, outside of those guys, they're inexperienced. So Aaron Robinson will get beat a few times. Cordell Flott will get beat a few times. Maurice Kennedy, if he plays, he will get beat a few times. But I think what mostly you got to look for, even if you're on any side of the conundrum, is development and progress. If we start the season as like the 27th ranked defense and our secondary is shit, you best believe and you best, I would say, expect the defense to improve in the second half. Because it's been too many years now that we've had rebuilds, and we've had this and that and whatever. And let's go back to 2019. I hate reflecting on it, but the defense never got better. They actually got worse or stayed the same. 1 week, we're giving up a total of 3 points to Washington. We're giving up 28 points to the Vikings. That's not progress. That's backwards bullshit. And Martindale honestly is going to be a guy that's going to stick to his guts. that's going to stick to blitz, man coverage, press coverage. I don't think he's going to go out of zone because I think he can believe that he has a time span where these corners can get better through experience, but he's also got the front edge to do it. Aziz, Ellerson Smith may be braced for a good year. Same thing with Quincy, Kayvon Thibodeau, right? So it's going to be an interesting situation with this Giants defense overall. But be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops up your drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. I know it's a long video. Hope you guys just got as much detail as possible. Appreciate you guys. Obviously, tomorrow night we will be streaming the Miami Heat hosting the Boston Celtics. Thursday will be the Dead Red Podcast. Friday will be the Yankees-Rays game. Tonight will be on NYY News TV with Pete Simonetti doing Game Season. And I'm probably going to have some videos out about the Giants more. I'm trying to get to some Yankee videos possibly. But we'll see what happens. Peace out, guys. See you later. Stay cool. Peace.